right, and that salute to... And for the Luftwaffe, one of the primary objectives was, as Colin just said, to knock out the RAF, and that it ultimately failed. I say that it's so special to see them flying together, not least because... This B-17G model, 1945 product of the Lockheed Vega plant in Burbank, California. It was too late to see wartime service with the US Army Air Forces, but it was utilised for a variety of training and test roles with the Army Air Forces and then the independent US Air Force until it sailed to France's Institut Géographique National for use as a long-range survey and mapping platform operating from Creil. Here you can see the bomb doors coming open on the B-17 for this pass.
Got a few nice photos of you two. Yes. I just looked through and I was like, oh.
During 1982. But since then, Elie Salingbo has taken on this incredible operation and against the odds kept the B-17 flying. Lost their lives in the European theatre during World War II, but particularly those of the 8th Air Force stationed here in East Anglia.
Wiesz, to chyba, że będą blisko sporo. A wiesz, jak będą blisko, to
Ja wyłączam, jak nie latałem.
They don't forget we're operating B-17s and B-24 Liberators on daylight raids deep in B-51 Mustangs, both of which we'll see in the show later, came along. Even then though, and despite the fact that the B-17 was such a tough, rugged airframe, their losses were grievous and the risks faced by those young men on operations desperately high. those who lost their lives.
Ale to jest też, no to jest blisko posługi, tak jest ile wchodzi.
And this final pass has smoke on 2 engines to simulate damaged power plants, the state in which so many B-17s returned from their raids, and it secondarily salutes the members of the Sally B Supporters Club. Final pass from the B-17. Into land, B-17G Flying Fortress, Sally B, captained today for that very elegant demonstration by Peter Kuipers with his co-pilot Paul Schluer. But we couldn't finish our bomber tribute in today's display without another chance to see
Ja widziałem już ich, ale teraz dopiero będzie.
Ciebie to no.
No rośnie mniej, jak powoli takich.
Tak, ale nie, ja
Bo mniej
już
lata.
to nie ten. Bo co dużym latem. I dużym latem już jako tako, ale jakikolwiek turbulencji cofa. A mały jest bardzo trzęsie.
bombs over Germany during World War II involved Blenheims, albeit long-nosed Mark IVs rather than this short-nosed Mark I version. On the day war broke out, aircraft flying from RAF Witten near Huntingdon, a single example flown on a reconnaissance sortie by Flying Officer McPherson, was the first aircraft to overfly Germany after the start of the war. The very next day, 2 squadrons of Blenheims from Wattisham in Suffolk conducted the first raid by Bomber Command of the whole war, attacking the German fleet in their port at Wilhelmshaven. But in front of us now, and they were in service from bases here during the Battle of Britain. The Army Corporation. Underneath the 2 Lysanes, the aircraft restoration. One of our several visitors from their fleet at Old Warden to this weekend's display. And it's the Shuttleworth Chief Engineer, Jean-Michel Munn, behind the controls of the Gladiator. Famous, which was for the exploits of 2 squadrons, numbers 138 and 161, stationed at Newmarket and at Tempsford, in completing in excess of 400 operations between 1941 and 44 in support of the Special Operations Executive, dropping agents into Nazi-occupied Europe, particularly France, and then recovering them once their duties were hopefully complete. And as you see it getting airborne there, you get quite a good look at those huge fairings on the front of the undercarriage legs, looking rather like a bit as pads. Those actually were such a steep dive, meant the bombs could be released from a shallower angle. But nonetheless, it's one of the aspects that gives this aircraft such a distinctive appearance. Just like the RAF, the Swedish Air Force was looking to expand in the mid-1930s, but one problem was Sweden's lack of a great deal of aircraft manufacturing capability. It was then that Saab entered the fray and took on this design, which was intended as a reconnaissance aircraft from its conception by a firm called Asia. Was a bit of an eventful affair. The canopy flew off and hit the test pilot, Clay Smith, on his head. He managed to make a safe landing at the Saab factory airfield at Linköping, even though he had blood streaming down his face. Two crew could be carried on board the pilot and the observer gunner housed under a very long continuous glass canopy. And in the end, 325 of these aircraft were built. They equipped 6 wings of the Swedish Air Force. That it replaced, not surprisingly when you consider that they included the likes of the British Hawker Hart biplane. They were first delivered in reconnaissance form to F3 wing of the Swedish Air Force in February 1942. B-17s of different units, or F-17s I should say, for reconnaissance, carried out maritime reconnaissance, naval cooperation, Baltic patrols. And a degree of anti-submarine patrol as well. There were occasional encounters with Axis aircraft. All of those saw the Saab 17 being attacked by a Luftwaffe Messerschmitt Bf-109. Many of its early jets, the likes of the 29 Tunnel, 32 Lansen, 35 Draken and 37 Viggen. We've never welcomed them to Duxford before, and we very much hope this won't be the last time. The man flying that aircraft has flown quite and about to go off the nets after the Wildcat. Another aeroplane flight, the ferry Swordfish 1. And it's very appropriate here, Colin, to have the Swordfish and the Catalina juxtaposed in the sky, because of course these were essential contributors to
the thing that he was most worried about during the Second World War was the threat of the U-boats, and certainly they were having a devastating effect on the convoys coming across the Atlantic, our lifeline to the New World, as it were. And the gap in the middle was the Catalinas.
Yes, including the last U-boat to be sunk during the Battle of the Atlantic, which was northeast of Salem-Vaux in the Shetlands, the day before VE Day, the 7th of May 1945, and that U-boat, U-320, was on its first operational patrol and was abandoned the following day.
Towards the end of the Second World War, these were also used a little bit late in the day perhaps, but for air-sea rescue. And this, if you've got good eyesight, you might be able to see the MIS pickup logo on the fuselage, on the nose there, and that represents one of the Catalinas that was based up at Halesworth, up there in Suffolk.
Catalina Aircraft, which is a group of shareholders, and in fact there is a shareholder information day taking place here at Duxford this October. There's an advert in the souvenir programme. Sunday the 6th of October is the date, and you don't have to be a pilot necessarily to want to buy a share of this.
And here comes the string bag. Here's the Swordfish. Cumbersome looking
aircraft that really we should never have gone to war with in the Second World War. It had been developed in the early 1930s, and 13 squadrons of the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy had them when war broke out in 1939. And And in many ways, that fact indicates some of the complacency that had taken hold in the 1930s about the nature of future threats and the sort of muddles that went on with military procurement at the time, because here was a biplane that could cruise at just 90 knots or 104 miles an hour when it was lightly laden, or 82 knots, 94 miles an hour with the torpedo underslung like we see here.
And this one, of course, is wearing invasion stripes.
Yeah, that indicates how long they went on in service, because they were still in use on D-Day 80 years ago this year, laying smokes German E-boats and U-boats. But the Swordfish didn't stop being produced until August 1944.
Road around to there.
Yes, I was saying it had an ungainly appearance, but it's been...
In 1941, one of the issues the flak gunners found on the Bismarck was that it was difficult to track the biplanes because they were so slow, and the guns struggled with close-in targets.
What's the matter?
Hearty wave there from the observer.
Now, that was really a drawback of the equipment on the Bismarck, and it would be rectified later on the likes of the Tirpitz. But it also helped that, as we've seen in this display with the aircraft being flung around with some gusto, that it was very stable and controllable, but turned very tightly, pilot's eye line. And the distance between two of those bulbs would represent 5 knots of speed at 1,000 yards range. In for a final pass with a wing waggle.
Ja byłem tam, mówię, na sam koniec potem plan. Nie ma. Na Belfast, na Churchill.
With the Slepchef Stork, and then behind, these really are all trainers, the Miles Magister, the Focke-Wulf FW-44J Stieglitz, and the very familiar de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Michael. And this Fury, one of the relatively few flying today with the original Bristol Centaurus engine. F-15 jet fighter. The jet age couldn't be staved off much longer by the Royal Navy. The Hawker Seahawk and the Supermarine Attacker replaced it on first-line duties, though the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve carried on flying Sea Furies until 1955. What an advance there had been in power plant and airframe technology. Land-based Furies were in service with the air forces of Iraq and Pakistan, amongst others. This, as I say, an ex-Iraqi one. But it's been painted in the colour paired with this aeroplane in displays as another representative of the ultimate in piston engine fighter technology. Here comes the F-8F-2P Bearcat. And even though this display, like all flying displays, will be being flown at a relatively conservative power setting, you still get to experience something of this aircraft's absolutely penetrating performance. It was a successor to the earlier F-6F Hellcat, markedly improved performance and lighter weight, but the trade-off was that it had shorter range. It was also trickier to land aboard carriers than the Hellcat had been. One pilot said that it dropped like a rock without power, and catapult takeoffs from the early carriers, which had rather violent catapults, were another matter entirely. One pilot said that the acceleration was of sufficient force that the blood was left in my eyes and the front part of my brain, and my vision was gone for the first several seconds after launch. In fact, the Bearcat was so powerful it could launch off a carrier deck under its own power in the right conditions. One feature that Grumman trialled during testing of the F-8F was using explosive charges to blow off the outer 3 feet of the wingtips if the aircraft exceeded a G loading of 8.5 to try and prevent structural failures, but it wasn't adopted in production because the system, when tested, always malfunctioned and blew just one wing off. One tip off, I ought to say. There's the Fury rolling out. Fighter aviation engineering flown by Paul Bonham. The Bearcat we've just seen, an F-8F-2P, a photo reconnaissance variant. It's been part of the fleet now known as the Fighter Collection since 1981.
And one of our visitors today will be certainly enjoying this spirited demonstration from the P-47, and that of course is Ed Cottrell. We were chatting to him earlier on. He's a veteran of the 9th Army Air Force, and he flew P-47s, of course. He got shot down, survived obviously. When we were talking to him earlier on, it's lunchtime, he was saying.
And the heavy weight of the P-47 counted in its favour in some circumstances because you could really get it going. just over 80 years ago, on the 28th of August 1944, that one of the 78 Fighter Group's pilots flying from this very airfield, E-17S, the Stagger Wing, Chief pilot Bill Barton was flying it in today's show. And they'd be inadequate. Among the first Royal Flying Corps aeroplanes to be deployed to France. It was an exceptionally stable, perhaps the most famous German aircraft of the First World War, the Dreidecker, the triplane, which is a replica owned by Paul Ford, who also owns the replica.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.